And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bashing us, yeah.
All right. Good morning, everybody. 8:05 live Eastern time. And of course, it's the finest I felt. It's Monday morning. Back in action, Marlon. Good morning. And of course, John banged in. John put in at 28. I don't know who authorized that. If it was Ron or Rob, who actually gave him the day off. For anyone who's not a cop or just a police enthusiast, the 28 is the numbered form for the NYPD when you want a day off. So, John, I hope you're having a good day, brother. Enjoy your time off today. Marlon and I are going to hit it. Talking about New York City, of course, NYPD, New York City, anything centered around public safety, and of course, anything nationwide. But today, specifically, talk about Zohran Mamdani. If sanctuary cities weren't enough, Zohran Mamdani is taking it a step further. So, Marlon, let's jump right into it. What are your thoughts? Let's talk about sanctuary cities. Let's talk about Zohran Mamdani. Let's talk about his executive order. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, guys. Morning, Chad. I hope you all had a great weekend. Yeah, my weekend's it's pretty quiet, and I think it went a little too fast. I can't believe it's Monday already. But yeah. So this morning we're talking about the latest push from seemingly Democrat mayors to again freeze out ICE from their cities, and that includes also Mayor Mamdani. Oh, I got people saying my mic is low.
No surprise, brother. You always have some kind of mic issue.
Yeah.
You got mic issues? I got internet issues.
Yeah. How's that, Annette? Let me know in the chat if it sounds better.
Actually, you know what? Shout out to Annette. I appreciate it because you were low earlier. And I thought maybe it was my side, so I didn't say nothing. But Annette, shout out to you because now I can actually hear him too. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Mamdani is the latest mayor to have signed an executive order trying to freeze out ICE from the city. That includes, so far we have Karen Bass of LA who signed one. We have Boston's Mayor Wu who has signed one. We have Brandon Johnson of Chicago who has signed one. We have the mayors of Oakland, Providence, New Jersey, Buffalo, and of course the moron in Minneapolis. And I'm talking about Jacob Frey. Okay, they've all signed executive orders in attempts of limiting ICE's reach into their respective cities. And in the case of New York City, this executive order includes prohibitions on ICE entering well, first of all, prohibitions on the federal government even being allowed to enter NYC government facilities or park there. But it also includes, prohibitions from entering properties without a warrant. It also includes the creation of interagency committees who are going to basically coordinate between multiple agencies' policies that restrict information sharing if that information can possibly help ICE. Okay, but as you can see from this list, it's many. The policy it goes far into New York City government, and this, as we're going to get to in this conversation, it's going to just inhibit the police even more, inhibit the NYPD even more. And in this case, I'm specifically referring to the task forces, and I will get to that as we go around. But we got a lot to talk about this, so let's get going.
So the real question, I think, at this point is, are we, well, let's just say this, right? Some supporters of the executive order of this decision, and it's happening nationwide, just as you mentioned, right? And if you notice, it's blue cities throughout this country, right? Sanctuary cities. So many supporters of this are saying that non-criminal offenders that are immigrants in this country are now free to work, free to live in this country, and have the same amenities that others have, that America is the land of the free, and supporting this. But the other question is, if that is true, and two things can be true at the same time. if that is true, is it also actually inhibiting serious offenders, people that are actually committing crimes that happen to be immigrants, from actually being detained and apprehended by ICE to actually make things safer? So is this a public safety issue? Is this a feel-good moment? What is this? So we have to analyze this. And personally, I think that this is a problem for public safety. And the other thing about this is putting local government at odds with the federal government, and especially putting law enforcement agencies at odds. So how does that affect the NYPD? What position does that put in the NYPD? And when I say the NYPD, I'm talking about how does that affect the boots on the ground? Because we know the position of leadership, because Jessica Tisch has already showed you that she supports the sanctuary cities. She even refers to immigration laws as civil immigration. She doesn't even refer to them as criminal. So, Marlon, what are your thoughts on public safety, and how does this affect public safety, and where is the dichotomy? What do you think? Because this is what I'm hearing. Many supporters say, well, like I said, allow people to live free from fear of reporting crimes, free from being victimized again if they're a victim of a crime. And what's the dichotomy from that, from actually serious criminal offenders being detained and apprehended?
Well, I saw somebody in the comments mention that this might be a toothless executive order. And I see what they're getting at, because it's only an executive order, and it's, as it stands, it's pretty vague. But that is part of the problem, okay? Because right now they're making. We know New York City is a sanctuary city, okay? But the problem is you're making vague policies that you're making vague policies on the fly, okay? And to that, I worry about the cops just trying to do their job, that are going to be roped up in this just by mere happenstance that they spoke to a Fed, they happen to they happen to have arrested a perp who has an ICE warrant. Okay, there's an example in this article where they mentioned that the city was going to conduct a shelter sweep, and they ended up not conducting that shelter sweep because it would have possibly helped ICE. And you see, we're getting to the point where we're going to actually stop, where that the obsession and the hysteria over ICE is going to impede the NYPD from doing its regular duties as a law enforcement agency, just because that doing that duty may benefit ICE, and that's where the problem lies. The problem is, I know the problem. I know the policy is vague, but the problem is who's going to get roped up in that policy just by doing their job, and what are the consequences going to be? Are they going to look to fire them? Are they going to look to prosecute you? There's another example in there that I'm going to bring up as we go around again.
Well, I think that's a great point, right? We talk about when it comes to these sanctuary cities. I think that the major issue is that it's policy over public safety, and to me, that's really the main thing. And when you look at immigration is really a federal. It's a federal policy, right? So it's actually not a local level policy. And it's interesting how democratic cities, especially a city like New York, the biggest metropolis in the entire country, creates their own laws in opposition of federal law. So to me, the question is that a violation of federal law, or do the cities actually have the rights and the privileges to do as such, to create their own laws to oppose to federal law? Because as I said, ultimately, immigration policy is on the federal level. So we have cities actually defying federal law. So to me, I think that this really does create blurred lines. And I think that, and to your point, and I think that these laws, and someone had mentioned here that's kind of toothless, I think they're ambiguous on purpose, right? Because it allows room to see how these things play out. And as they play out, and just as you see at a local level with city council, we see as things play out, they start to drill down into the minutia and start to really narrow in on their angle of legislation, right? For instance, if you look at city council, first you had the chokehold ban for New York City police officers. You had the Right to Know Act. And these are kind of ambiguous. They didn't leave too much information, except for the chokehold ban, but it starts to drill down. Then we get to the How Many Stops Act. So it's little by little. So if they create this law, in my opinion, it's not toothless, and it starts to actually narrow in and really get down to where they're headed to. And ultimately, this major opposition comes down to policy, politics. It's pushback towards Trump. This is some scary stuff that we have. It's not only just New York City. This has happened on the national level. And that's why I do agree with you, Marlon. We often talk about that we're heading towards a balkanized government, because we have cities that are particularly like, this city's blue, this city's red. And before we know it, I do believe people are going to completely identify as, you're blue, I'm red. And that's where things can turn, unfortunately, scary and violent.
Yeah. To that, so this is the list of mayors that have those executive orders right now, and you can see it's pretty long. Well, what's funny enough is a lot of maybe it's just me, but a lot of the mayors, a lot of the governors of those same states seem to be, kind of laying low and not as, they're. I mean, we have Hochul, who signed that measure to prevent ICE from going to so-called safety zones. But, a lot of these other governors aren't, they're not taking action just yet. But anyway, yeah, so, one of the problems I've always had with the diaphragm law is that in the process of a chaotic situation where you're arresting a perp and the perp is starting to resist, you may inadvertently have to, you guys end up on the ground and you're tussling with the perp. You may inadvertently put pressure on his upper torso. Okay. Now what happens in a situation like that, and it gets, maybe the arrest gets ugly and the perp gets injured, Now, are you now at fault for inadvertently having put pressure on his upper torso? And that's the problem I have with this, okay? Because you're making a law that's really, you're making policy, right? That really it's trying to go around the actual law, okay? And I wonder in this process again, how many cops in New York City are going to inadvertently get roped up in this, inadvertently get themselves in trouble, just by merely doing the job that they've been doing for so long now. Okay. One of the examples. Okay. So just to give you guys some context, the DOI, Department of Investigation, for those civilians out there, they had a report detailing, the city's compliance with the NYPD's compliance with local laws as they pertain to the sanctuary city status of the city. And in this report, they detailed some examples where, to me, it seems the cops involved inadvertently, according to DOI, they inadvertently broke the sanctuary city rules. And some of those include an officer who, I guess this was a supervisor, who they're saying he created a database, but it more than likely sounds like he put an alert on individuals. And for those of you unfamiliar with it, in the NYPD, one of the programs we use is DOS Lite. I believe the supervisors have access to DOS Heavy, but it's been a while. But anyway, the program, which we mentioned last week because Tish is looking to enhance it, allows you to put alerts on individuals. And it sounds to me like that's one of the things this guy did. And, the DOI is stating that he violated the city sanctuary laws because the people were potentially subject to civil immigration enforcement. So again, here's a guy just looking to do his job. More than likely, he's a supervisor, right? looking to do his job, something that we've done for a while now. But now it's becoming a problem because ICE is doing a sweep nationwide, and it's mentioned in this particular article that he was later on removed from his post on that task force, and of course he lost the computer access that he had before. So here is just one example where just doing your job inadvertently crosses paths with the sanctuary city laws, and now you get in trouble.
Now, that's a great point, right? Because you're a law enforcement officer within the NYPD, and you get caught in the crosshairs of opposition of sanctuary city laws and opposition of federal laws. And that's a great point. Could the federal government, now, I think this is a great point to ask, could the federal government, the Department of Justice, I mean, we know they won't go after Eric Adams, but could they actually pursue something towards an NYPD cop for actually having pushback towards ICE, towards another law enforcement agency, and violating immigration laws while working for the NYPD, even though they're under direct leadership of Zohran Mamdani? And I think that's a great point, because it does put the NYPD, especially the boots on the ground, in the crosshairs, because they're being led by fools. They're being led by leadership that's actually putting them odds with other law enforcement agencies. Now, in Zohran Mamdani's position, he's a complete politician that's a democratic socialist. But I have to ask and say, I have a real problem with NYPD leadership, especially Jessica Tisch. Jessica Tisch, who's actually fallen in line. And we understand why, because of politics. But it's absolutely disgusting, because this trickles down, because your chief of department, who's a complete jellyfish, is going to direct the same message towards the cops. What I would love to hear, excuse me, is from some form of strong leadership, and I guess we'll never see it, and say this is not how we run a police department in this city and in this country. If you commit a crime, there's no bias. We don't look at who you are. We don't look at if you're an immigrant. We don't look at your gender, right? It's interesting, right? We're supposed to be equal opportunists, right? We're not supposed to care what your gender is, what your color is. If you commit a crime, we arrest you with no bias, right? But yet, if you commit a crime and you're an immigrant, that we have to acknowledge, and we can't pay attention to it. And what does this also do? To me, this creates information silos, right? If law enforcement agencies are not communicating with each other, and communication breaks barriers. So if we're not communicating, if the NYPD does not communicate with ICE or vice versa, we're creating communication barriers. And communication is probably the most effective tool in crime fighting, right? Especially databases, coordinating information, exchanging information. That's the key to success for keeping crime down. And if information is being suppressed, how can we actually investigate patterns or particular crimes? And also leverage. Leverage is very important also. If you're a good intelligence officer or any law enforcement officer in the NYPD or any blue city in this country or any city, information is valuable, and leverage is so important. Why do we arrest people? We arrest people to get information, to arrest other people, to prevent crimes before they happen, or to stop crimes while they're happening. Now, that's also leverage. If someone commits a crime, or maybe it's a low-level crime, and they violated immigration laws, that could be leverage also to actually get information to stop other crimes. But if we suppress that information, an NYPD officer can't even discuss it, to me, that's another barrier. Another barrier in law enforcement. That's a barrier in policing, especially for the NYPD.
Yeah. I mean, I saw a comment in there also. Who was it? Yeah, Nin says, Marlon, it turns out a huge portion of the population doesn't support the way policing has been done. Can you be more specific, Nin? Because look, humans are imperfect, okay? And we talk all the time about the problems in the NYPD, okay? But just because there are problems in the NYPD, it doesn't mean you throw out the entire system and you throw out what has been going on for decades, okay? What are we not? I mean, what gives an illegal more privileges in America than a regular person, than a regular U.S. citizen? Okay, you come here illegally. First of all, you've already broken the law, and now we have to tippy-toe around, sending you back. Okay, that's. I mean, I don't understand where you're coming at here, but I haven't seen you in a while in here, Nin. So welcome back.
Marlon, I just want to point out something funny, right?
Mhm.
Because Nin is trying to make fun of us, which I think is hilarious. When he says only 125 people are watching the show, guess what, Nin? If that was the case, you're one of them. So thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah, we don't care if there's 120 or zero. We're still gonna be here. But anyway, Raheem, I saw another comment from him who says, "You guys think this order will stop ICE? The mayor has no power over the federal government." Guys, be easy. Yeah. Thanks for your comment, Raheem. But remember, I think this executive order isn't for ICE. It's for you, the worker in the city. It's for you, the cops. It's for you, the law enforcement personnel in the city. There's very little they can do to stop ICE. Okay, but there's much they can do to dissuade you from actually doing your job. And and as a consequence of not doing your job, what's going to happen is things are just going to get worse. We've talked about it before that by not doing their job, first of all, you're giving ICE a reason to have nationwide sweeps by the city being a sanctuary city, right? But also, you're risking the chance that these encounters between protesters and ICE are going to go sideways, like they have in Minnesota. Okay, this is why, like, when ICE is doing whatever they're doing a sweep. And there are protesters in the area. You need police to maintain order so that ICE could quickly do their job and be done with it. Because if you don't have police there, you're going to have those exact same incidents that happen in Minnesota where people have already lost their lives. Okay, so it's not. This isn't meant for ICE. This is meant to further stop NYPD from maintaining order in the cases of those sweeps.
So Nin, since you're excuse me, Nin, since you're one of the 125 people watching right now, which we really appreciate, by the way, outstanding. Thank you for being a fan. So Nin says, Marlon, look up the Fourth Amendment. Do you understand why the Bill of Rights applies to everyone regardless of citizenship? It's because of this chilling effect that we see. So nowhere did Marlon or myself ever say that the Bill of Rights does not apply to non-documented citizens. What the Bill of Rights says, it doesn't say citizens, it says persons, right? So the Bill of Rights does apply to persons. So and I'm glad you brought that up. That's a great point, Nin, which is why it shows even further. Why do we have law enforcement at odds with other law enforcement when it comes to detaining someone who is potentially violating our immigration laws? Because, and to your point, Nin, if someone violates or it's alleged they violated immigration laws, they are entitled to the 5th and 14th Amendments. They're entitled to due process. Unlike Marlon Bethel, when he was terminated from the NYPD, he did not get a due process, but non-documented, undocumented citizens are entitled to due process, and they get a due process. They get a civil hearing when they're detained as far as potential deportation. So thank you very much to your point, Nin. You're right. It just shows how lenient and this country is, because even if someone violates immigration laws, I think it's pretty simple. You either did it or you didn't. The preponderance of evidence is not hard to meet. Someone is still entitled to due process. Now, that what we're talking about right now, and I think ultimately, from my perspective, in the angle that we all should be looking at, is how does this affect public safety? And it does. It's because we have law enforcement agencies that are actually not communicating with each other. And instead of creating systems of lines of communication, which communications is definitely, in my opinion, a key to public safety, we're creating barriers. And we're actually having mayors throughout the city, especially Zohran Mamdani, actually demonizing ICE. And what does that do to the vision and the mission of the NYPD? What does that do to the boots on the ground? It puts them in a very precarious position where not only they cannot work with another agency, but they're being told that this agency is a rogue agency. And for many young cops, they may not understand the politics that has been fermented in this. And for someone who said that the mayors ultimately do not have power in opposition of federal government. I disagree. I think that the local law enforcement, the local municipalities actually have far more power than the federal government. I mean, the mayor, especially in blue cities, especially a city like New York City, has full access to the NYPD. They control the NYPD. Their commissioners are appointed, are going to do exactly what they're told, which means leadership starts at the top and everything falls down in line to the bottom, which means everyone's going to fall in line. So I think that local municipalities have far more power than people actually perceive.
Yeah. Yeah. But I you know what? I think I think an angle that's been missing here is that the problem is that this is causing things to escalate. And I'm going to talk about it as we go further on, why I think that's the entire point of this. I don't think the point is to freeze out ICE, because you can't do that. I mean, you really can't do that. Okay, it's the federal government's jurisdiction, immigration. It's not the state. Okay, so not the state or the city. Okay, so but when the actions that are being caused in a lot of ways on both ends we've talked about it in the past, that ICE's strategy is unsustainable long term, and with upwards of 14 million illegals in this country, it would take 37 years a surge at 37 years in order to round up all of them. So it's unsustainable long term. What you need is the states and the cities to give up their sanctuary city status or to amend it, okay? Because they're not using it as how it was originally meant to be, okay? Do you need to amend it so that they'll work with ICE, so that ICE doesn't have to conduct those searches, okay? You need a whole of government approach, okay? So we've talked about that. But the problem is, this, as we also said before, the surge is creating a backlash in those communities, okay, who already hate law enforcement and police. And in return, what these municipalities are doing, as you can see here with the list of mayors we just named, right? What they're doing is creating policy on their end that's creating more chaos from their side, okay? Because again, when ICE is conducting a raid, right? When ICE is conducting a sweep, and you have a group of leftist protesters who are, or they're already hysterical about all of this, and they confront ICE and they escalate these encounters, and ICE themselves is not accustomed to dealing with protests, and certainly not a crowd control. So what's happening is that policy is creating more chaos. And you see, the entire situation is creating an atmosphere where more people could get hurt or killed, and in turn, what would that create? You've got soon you'll have a nationwide movement akin to BLM and protesters in the street, like the many multiple summers of protesters that we've had, and that's why I think this is the entire goal. And it's something called, well, as we go around, I'll mention it again, right? There's a political strategy called Cloward-Piven. And I absolutely believe that Cloward-Piven is what's happening right here.
That's a fantastic point. And before I go into the points that you're talking about, which I think these are great flashpoints, I want to reflect on this idiot Nin here, which I think is kind of funny, by the way. Thank you for being part of the 125. We appreciate it. But Nin keeps referring to the Constitution and people's rights. Now, the Constitution does protect all persons, right? Citizens or not. However, the Constitution does not protect you if you do violate immigration laws, right? And exactly that. They're immigration laws. So I think it's quite interesting. We're talking about laws of a policy. And if someone is in this country illegally, they're still violating the law. And we're not saying that we should be out there hunting for your average person. We're talking about public safety here, and we're talking about people that could be potential offenders and committing serious crimes that actually need to be detained by ICE. They need to be apprehended because it's a public safety issue. Keep in mind, ICE is a law enforcement agency. Excuse me. And the purpose of ICE is to potentially apprehend and detain illegal immigrants that could be a national threat to this country on a nationwide level or on a local level throughout these cities. So what do we have here? We have, in my opinion, it's intention by these mayors throughout this country in blue cities to actually put the citizens in their city at risk of vulnerability. Why? We have illegal military age males in this country that stem from Tren de Aragua, that stem from other crews. We have gangs that have disseminated throughout this entire country, and they're highly funded, and they're scary for residents out there. And the fact that this is a barrier, we should utilize every tool at our disposal to have leverage over potential perpetrators that could be committing crime towards our residents and ultimately towards Americans. So when we talk about protests, I think that's a great point, right? We talk about First Amendment activities. Here we are. We're talking about the Constitution again. And we've put ICE in a position to do policing that they're just not capable of doing at this point, in my opinion. They're very capable, right? And I've often talked about this. I think they're capable of preparing for planned events. Federal agencies are particularly well planned and trained when it comes to surveillance investigations. But your average day police officer in a blue city, especially one like New York City, metropolis of New York City, is used to the unexpected, the volume of dealing with people on a daily basis. This is a very different type of training. So ICE, and ultimately, if these mayors really cared about safety of their residents, they would have the NYPD or another city, just like Marlon mentioned, like Oakland. You would have your local municipality at the helm in charge and have ICE assist them. Why? Because it's safer for residents, because these police departments are used to the everyday chaos. And I'm not saying that ICE is not trained, but it's a different style of training. And ultimately, I think what's going to happen is eventually ICE is going to have to get local level style type training. Their standards are going to have to change and be much higher, because not only do they have their training for surveillance, planned events, but they're also going to need training on local level policing, on policing in municipalities and policing in sanctuary cities, which is far different from planned events. Every day working in the NYPD is an unplanned event. You're dealing with the unexpected. So this actually, to your point, Marlon, we've mentioned numerous times in different episodes, actually puts people far more at a safety risk. Why? Because ICE is not prepared for this. And you're seeing these violent encounters turn. You see two cases in Minneapolis, and this is just the tip of the spear at this point. We're going to see this even further at this point. So ultimately, I blame the politicians for putting people at a safety risk.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's absolutely a danger to public safety. You recall when ICE came to Canal Street in September. Now things didn't go sideways there, but just think of all the people who are just trying to get through their day. You just had a long day of work and you're trying to get home, and here it is. The streets are blocked off. We got protesters in the street. We got ICE in the street, and you're going to be stuck in traffic for 40 minutes to an hour. And that's on top of the other traffic you're going to get stuck in on your way back home. These things make life intolerable for the regular people in cities. You have the police has to do their duties, which includes maintaining the quality of life for the city, and that includes, again, managing managing crowd control. That includes preventing ICE sweeps from escalating and becoming a bigger issue than they should have been. And again, this is why I think these are all meant to escalate the situation, because it's certainly not going to stop ICE from conducting their job. And let me see if I could pull up some of the other issues that were mentioned here. Yeah. So the DOI's report, right? Again, also mentions that the NYPD should conduct audits of officers assigned to task forces with federal agents, providing additional guidance on how officers should assess whether a request they receive would actually aid civil immigration enforcement. So keep in mind now that the NYPD has multiple, is a part of multiple federal task forces, right? And my question is how could anyone work in any of these task forces now? And I mean, you're gonna literally be on tippy toes now, because all of these federal agencies have been part at some point or another of this immigration sweep. So, if we continue this conversation with ICE, how much further are we gonna get? At what point does you sharing information with your federal partners, cause you to inadvertently cross the sanctuary city laws, and what happens to you when it does? Okay.
Well, that's a great point. Let's also talk about, in my opinion, what are the costs? What are the costs that affect a city in America that is a sanctuary city, especially New York City? And we've already seen the cost. According to Zohran Mamdani, he wasn't aware of a $12 billion deficit in New York City, which I find hard to believe. Absolutely, you knew that. That was all at your disposal before you were elected to mayor. One of the reasons, which I think is a major contributing factor towards the $12 billion deficit, besides the alleged corrupted acts by the Eric Adams administration, which are right in front of our face that have costed us millions in lawsuits, we also have a sanctuary city laws, which I believe is a major contributing factor to the fiscal crisis in New York City. And what is that? We have a mass amount of immigrants that move to blue cities. Why? Because it's an open door. It's a welcome mat. In New York City, we need food, we need shelter for immigrants, we need public school, we need housing, hospital care. So these are costs that are affected. These are costs that are on the taxpayers' back in these blue cities throughout this country. So that's a major point. Cost effectiveness. And what does that do ultimately to small businesses throughout New York City? Small businesses just can't keep up with it. Businesses are leaving New York City. It's just a great escape. It's not just New York City. It's other blue cities throughout this country. But obviously, we put a centric focus on New York City. And I think that the costs that are affected by this are just extremely damning. And we see the effects from the Eric Adams administration. Zohran Mamdani is telling you about a $12 billion deficit that's really affecting New York City, and now he's willing to take this further.
Yeah. I saw another comment in there. Yes, let me just get this off the screen. Just a quick comment. I Ron says lots of libs in the chat today.
Oh, come on. You never saw that social media thing? That's AA Ron. AA Ron.
Oh, okay. All right.
Remember? Did you ever see the guy? He's pretends he's a teacher, and he's kid. He's like, yo, AA Ron. He's like, Aaron. He's like, no, you're AA Ron.
Wait, is that from Key and Peele? Maybe.
I don't know.
I think it might be from Key and Peele because I've seen episodes about that where he's a teacher, right?
Yeah, he's a teacher. Yeah.
Yeah, he's black and he's
and he messes up all the kids' names. It's hilarious.
Yeah,
he's like,
because they have like
Aaron, you hear? He's like Aaron. He's like, what? That's your name.
Yes.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. The ones with the football player names is pretty hilarious too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but he says lots of libs in the chat today. Yeah, and to that, keep in mind we're an open platform, so we welcome everybody in here, and you can see Nin is in here. You can call us whatever you want, Nin. We appreciate your viewership, though. And again, this is an open platform, so anybody can come on, and we have an audience that includes people from the left, people from the right. But with that said, I notice that when we talk about certain issues, we get an influx of a lot of new people, right? And a lot of these new people only show up for those episodes, and they don't for other episodes. And also, the viewer count that we're looking at is always lower when we talk about these certain issues. Like if we talk about freedom of speech on the internet and where things are headed to, we get a lower viewer count. If we talk about this issue, we get a lower viewer count. And I don't think any of that is coincidence, okay? Because they don't want you talking about it. You see, people like Nin, sorry, Nin, I'm going to have to call you out here. But people like Nin want you to pick a side. They want you to be right or left and not understand that most people are in the middle, okay? And most people have a nuanced position on this. We don't like that ICE is doing these sweeps, but we also don't like that the city governments are not working with the federal government and doing their part to make sure these illegals are out of this country. Okay, you don't have a right. An illegal doesn't have a right to be in this country. Okay, well, people like my parents, you know, they worked hard to get into this country so that I could become a citizen in this country. Okay, you don't have the right to hop the fence. We know now. I say this knowing that if I wasn't a legal immigrant of this country, actually maybe not, because my country is a lot better than it is back in the old days, you know. But if you're a person from a third world country, you're going to do whatever you can to get to a place where you'll have a better life for yourself and your family, right? So you may come into this country illegally, but the point is we shouldn't facilitate that for you, okay? We shouldn't make it easier for you to come in this country, okay? And we shouldn't tippy-toe around the fact that you're here illegally, and we want to send you back to, you know, and tell you to come back in the legal way. And that is the problem. That is the problem. But people like Nin want you to pick a side. Pick a side, okay? Pick a side and continue what's been going on in this country, especially in the last 10 years, which is a culture war between the right and the left, okay? And above all of that are the people manipulating you to pick a side, okay? Do you think people like, again, I'm gonna call out Trump on this. Do you think Trump cares whether you're right or left? He puts on this game of culture war, but do you think he cares? Okay, do you think they really care? Do you think if you're a multi-billionaire, they actually care about you right or left? No, because at the end of the day, all of these guys are sitting down and having dinner and laughing it up and making contracts with each other and benefiting from the system while you aren't, okay? So why should you pick a side when the people who are manipulating things don't have a side? Okay, you got to look at this nuance and see what's wrong, what's a failure, and what's working. Okay, and when you pick a side, you're just continuing the same failure that's happening, and you're just gonna continue getting manipulated into thinking that this guy that's coming in is going to save you. Okay.
I think, excuse me, I think it's quite interesting, right? When you're a law enforcement officer, and whether ICE or local law enforcement, what's interesting is that they're being put at odds with each other, yet they both take an oath. When you join the NYPD, if you join a local law enforcement agency, one of these blue cities that pushes sanctuary cities, you take an oath, and that oath is to the Constitution. And when you join ICE, when you become an ICE enforcement officer, you also take an oath, and that's to the Constitution. So to me, it's quite interesting, right? If you're a federal agent or a local law enforcement agent or a police officer or sheriff, you are under the Constitution. You take an oath to the Constitution, and yet these laws have put politics over optics and politics over policy, and yet the NYPD and ICE both take an oath to the Constitution. It's quite interesting, right? It's quite interesting. So, in my opinion, I think this is really evil, right? I think that law enforcement should always exchange information. Now, that doesn't mean they always have to agree. I think there's many times where the mayor of New York City or any other city could have their police department communicating with ICE about particular scenarios or different incidents or things that are going on in their city, and they can have disagreements, right? We often say, and I say it often, opposition meets opportunity. And they can actually make decisions on how they're going to move forward on particular things, but to not communicate at all. This is absolutely ridiculous. To put a fence, to put a barrier between two law enforcement agencies, I think is pretty much evil. It's evil, especially when you're a mayor, like New York City. You're supposed to serve your residents. The residents are supposed to serve you. You're supposed to give every available tool at their disposal to keep them safe. Now, many people look at ICE as some type of rogue agency that just pulling people off the street. Like, they make it sound like they're pulling people out of supermarkets that are, some lady that has 5 kids. What we're talking about here is people that are committing serious crimes, committing crimes in New York City, committing crimes in other cities that are affecting the life and quality of people that are there, that have no intention to ever become contributing societal members to this country. They have no intentions of ever contributing anything to society. So why should a person like that have the fruits and privileges to be in this country under the Constitution? So keep in mind, if you're in the NYPD, you take an oath to that Constitution. And if you're in ICE, you take an oath to that Constitution as well.
Yeah, people don't understand how like by the cities not not doing their job. You're if you don't like the policy that ICE is doing right now, if you don't like those sweeps that ICE are doing, right, then shouldn't you be encouraging your city and state to work with ICE so they don't have to do it, so they don't have to go that route? But no, the same people like Nin who are telling us, to pick a side, aren't pushing for that, So essentially, they want us to go around, immigration law and go around the Constitution, and allow you want us to become you want us to disregard the borders entirely, okay? And that is the problem here. That's the problem here. People need to realize you're being manipulated, okay? And you need to zoom out and look at what exactly is being put before you. So let me yeah, so I mentioned earlier, right? This is another example of the department not doing their job, because their job might run afoul of the sanctuary city rules, might possibly run afoul of sanctuary city laws. Okay. So it says the Department of Learned Homeland Security investigation was also planning to sweep the hotels as part of a civil immigration enforcement. Top department officials called off the action because it would have violated sanctuary city laws. They backed off because, again, political expediency, well, rather optics. Okay. And again, this is something that shelter sweep are done all the time, but now we're not going to do it at migrant shelters. So let me get this off the screen. Yeah. So yeah, it's like I said, where what gives the illegal more privileges than the actual citizen of this country. It's bad. It's a bad look, and it risks escalating things. And again, I'll talk about the Cloward-Piven as we go on. I think it's not a coincidence that we're also hearing recently that in the last 3-4 days, you're seeing comments from both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama talking about how we need a national immigration strategy. And I think I'll show you how that plays into the Cloward-Piven. Let me just pull it up.
I think it's important to actually discuss, on a layman's term, what is a sanctuary city, right? And ultimately, what a sanctuary city is the fact that a local level law enforcement agency will limit their cooperation with ICE, with the federal government when it comes to immigration laws. Now, I think it's interesting. This is where they're taking it a step further, right? And that's why I don't think they're toothless lions on this. I think that they're actually looking to put their feet to the fire. That they really think they're looking to strike the iron on this one. So ultimately, sanctuary cities were implemented to limit cooperation, but now what's actually being put in place is to just stop all communication together. That's where things become a complete threat. Information needs to flow. especially when it comes to law enforcement and agencies. And that's the key to success when it comes to fighting crime. Marlon, you know it doing intelligence, and I know it doing special operations. The key was that flow of information. We would often say, right, that we found just within the NYPD, not even with communication, exchange information with an outside agency, sometimes just even within the NYPD, there are barriers that it's tough to exchange certain information or communication. That's one thing I have to give to Jessica Tisch, to her point. She did say that she doesn't want units working in silos anymore to exchange information. So the same thing should go on a higher level, right? Small unit leadership breakdown, right? And that breakdown should go to a higher level. There should be constant flow and exchange information from ICE to local law enforcement and local law enforcement back to ICE, right? Because their intentions, both intentions are to find potential threats to this country, right? Whether someone is a threat on a local level or someone is a threat to this country nationwide. So I some of these questions that you posed, Marlon, I think are quite interesting, and we spoke about it before. Could this potentially put an NYPD cop with their boots on the ground that really doesn't understand, and I don't mean to say that they're stupid or ignorant. I was in that position also. I served almost 20 years within the NYPD, and I was not aware towards the end of my career that I was actually a political pawn, and how much politics does play a role. We often see and hear people say, well, I don't want to speak politics. Well, you have to, because unfortunately, law enforcement is not as apolitical as I thought it was supposed to be. And it's actually far from apolitical. We see people actually taking sides and utilizing their police department to push political agendas. And this is another political agenda. We have to ask ourselves why.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. Just having technical issues there. Yeah. I think. Again, I think the reason why is. Let's see if I can pull it up here. Yeah. I think the reason why is because they need the escalation. Okay, and they need the continuation of the culture wars that we've been in. Okay, and again, the culture wars is it keeps us distracted, and it keeps us from all realizing that we have the same enemy. You know, we have the common enemy that is trying to take advantage of the system, while the rest of us here live in poverty, and the rest of our living standards declines. Okay, now there's been a couple of reports that have showed that the living standards in America have declined over the last couple of years. So I'm not just talking out the ass on this. Okay, all right. The death rates in America have declined a little bit over the last couple of years. Okay, now we won't go into it here, but my point here is that if we all stop fighting with each other and start talking about the common problems in America, then we would work towards it. Okay, and we would realize that it's the same enemies trying to take advantage of the situation, and thus we have to plug those gaps and prevent them from taking advantage of the situation, instead of things getting so bad that we God knows where this country will be. But I mentioned before the Cloward-Piven. Okay, Cloward-Piven is a political strategy that advocates overloading a government's bureaucratic systems to trigger a crisis, forcing a collapse that mandates radical reform. Okay, and so why would they want Cloward-Piven in this situation? And I think it's because they want a immigration policy that's beneficial to allowing illegal, or rather allowing foreigners to work in this country without going through the arduous process of vetting that we have now and waiting. They want foreigners to be able to quickly obtain visas. And we've talked about this before, like the H-1B visas, right? They want these foreign workers to be able to quickly come in here and replace U.S. domestic workers. Because why? Because they're cheaper. Okay, why train, educate, and change? Certainly, you'd have to change the academic system in America to move back to more trade systems. What trade schools, right? That takes time and money. Why do that when you could import your worker from India, the tech worker from India, right, and pay him $2 an hour to replace you, right? Why do that? These corporations would save how much money by in the long term by just importing the guy from India, okay? And this is what I believe is going on here. And the reason they need to use something like Cloward-Piven, because government in a democracy, in a democratic republic, right, moves much slower than say if you're in a authoritarian country like maybe China, right? In our country in the West, we have discussion, we have debate before we actually take action on that policy, and that debate and discussion takes years. Okay, it takes years, and they don't want that, because those years also cost these oligarchs money. So it is my belief that what's happening now is they're deliberately trying to create friction in the system in order to quickly advance things.
That's a great point. I'll tell you why it's a great flashpoint. Is because driving emotional stress is the oldest tool in politics, right? It's emotional messaging that drives movement in politics, right? By getting people emotionally worked up. In my opinion, putting local law enforcement at odds with ICE, man, say that 10 times. To me, in my opinion, it's almost a form of domestic terrorism. And the reason why I say that is because if you look at the ideology of terrorism is to input fear into people, create alarm, make them worried about their finances. And that's what you see when it happens when people are pushing this messaging about immigration laws. That what they're telling you is that that ICE is coming here. They're just going to pick up people off the streets and just take people away. And what they want to do is create that fear and create that emotional stress. That's how they push agendas. I totally agree with what you're saying, Marlon, that they want to create that emotional distress and fear. If you drive emotion into people, you get a movement and you get a reaction. And case in point, right? We talk about it often, is that providing perspective with some evidence or anecdotal experience. Just look at our chat today. I want to thank our friends and listeners. I want to thank our haters. I want to thank the people in this chat today that are just completely far left. But we have a lot of, if you look at the chat today, it's very emotion driven, right? There's a lot of emotion involved. Why? Because when we talk about political issues just as this, it drives emotion. Why? Because the politics in this particularly doesn't affect property, it affects people. And we're not saying that people that violate immigration laws are not people, right? I've arrested thousands of people in my career with illegal firearms, and every one of them was a person, and they were treated with respect. Even though they committed a crime or allegedly committed a crime, they were treated with respect. And someone who violates immigration laws is committing a crime, and yet they still deserve respect. And what is that respect? That respect is the due process that they get under the Constitution, because the Constitution, unlike NIN wants you to believe that the Constitution is not afforded to those that violate immigration laws. And in fact, it is, because they are afforded under the 5th and 14th Amendments, and that's due process. All persons are entitled to due process. To me, this is a form of domestic terrorism because it falls under those lines. You change someone's agenda. You have a political movement by getting to people by emotional stress, by driving fear. And that's one thing I learned in the military, especially in the Marine Corps, is an act of terrorism. One of the contributing factors by getting a movement or having an agenda, accomplishing a mission, is by creating fear. And that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Nah. See, I was trying to load up a video, but it's just not. I'm just having technical issues. I think I think it's the browser that's giving me issues to try and load it up. But so just to go back on this Cloward-Piven, it was the product of Columbia University professors, and they were also sociologists in the 1960s, and their aim in that particular case was to force a guaranteed national income, UBI, basically force the government to restructure the welfare system. And their idea was they were going to encourage all eligible people to sign up for welfare benefits simultaneously in order to overwhelm the system and force, again, by the system being overwhelmed, they would force government to open up the system even more and to restructure the system so that it becomes universal basic income. Now, how does that sound? Doesn't that sound a lot like what's happening now with immigration? You know, think of it for a second. The target right now, like I said, is they want to restructure the immigration policy so that foreigners can quickly come in here and not have to wait and not have to go through the vetting process. You know, and the mechanism in this case is overwhelming the system. First, they did it with opening the gates and allowing upwards of I think some of the projections are 3 million people came in over the Biden years, 3 million illegals. So first they tried it that way, and now they're trying it by pitting poor policy from ICE against poor policies from the cities right now, and the resulting escalation, it will force the government to try and mitigate civil disobedience. Okay, but you see the goal, just by the 1966 strategy, their goal was creating a massive budgetary and administrative crisis where they hope to force the federal government to replace the failing system again with UBI. And think of it, that's exactly what's happening here. They want to force the federal government to change what's really a failing system, because it takes a while to on their end, for the benefit of the oligarchs, it takes a while to get these cheap foreign labor into here, and it takes, on the government's end, it takes a long time. It takes a while to be able to get the illegal out of this country. Okay. So, so my point here is that what I believe is happening right now is this exact strategy, and the fact that, again, over the last 4 days, we all of a sudden see Obama and Hillary Clinton pop up and miraculously start talking about illegal immigration. In the case of Obama, he stated that we're a nation of laws, and how we have to create a national strategy for this. Okay, I don't think it's a coincidence that all of a sudden they come out of nowhere. Okay, and are in the public are in the public spotlight again, and their videos, by the way, are being heavily pushed on social media. So I'm sure within the next couple of days, you're going to see either Hillary Clinton's, what she said, or what Obama said on your social media feed.
I'm glad that you brought up UBI, because I talk about UBI often, and in my opinion, I think that we are potentially headed for a UBI in this entire country. I mean, I in my opinion, our lives could change forever, and I think this could be actually in our lifetime, not something that's far, far away. And it really comes down to, I think, AI and robotics that could actually put us in a position where we're all living on UBI, which is universal basic income. Maybe we'll get to a point where no one's working. I think artificial intelligence, while it could make millionaires at one time, I think artificial intelligence could also put people in a position where no one's actually working anymore. So when it comes to actually sanctuary cities, I believe that when it comes to sanctuary cities, especially blue cities, that it's not necessarily base income, I think it's emergency support services, right? Well, at least that's how they're trying to label it. They're labeling it as emergency support services, right, for immigrants. And the burden is on the taxpayer for funding housing, food, right? I just said it before, housing, but different forms of shelter. And where does that money come from? It's not universal base income, but it actually comes from the taxpayer. It's on the backs of the taxpayer. So it's the taxpayer that's actually providing a UBI, a universal base income, for those immigrants in New York City and other blue cities throughout this country. Now, ultimately, I know some critics argue that undocumented citizens eventually become taxpayers themselves. And in many cases, yes, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about your everyday non-documented person that's a contributing member to society and is taking that path and trying to become a citizen in the city. What we're talking about is illegal military age males. We're talking about people that have come to this country who violated immigration laws, who have no intention of ever being a contributing member to this society. No, they have no intentions to ever contributing to this country. So universal base income is something that's real. And Nin makes a good point here. Look, Nin is saying UBI is the real enemy. Well, it depends how you look at it, right? It depends how you look at it. So you listen, the bottom line is this is creating a lot of emotions. We see it in the chat today. I want to thank the friends and also that you've actually gotten involved in the conversation, because the only way to break barriers is to have that communication that we have right now. So, Marlon, I think that's a great point. I know you were stepping out for a second, but if we look at UBI, and I do think that we are headed for UBI because of artificial and robotics, but is it UBI for immigrants? And I think it's a taxpayer burden for that UBI. It's the taxpayers that are actually paying that income. And yet here we are in a city like New York City where you already have a $12 billion deficit. So this is quite interesting. This is quite interesting. So what do you think, Mo?
Well, if the illegal immigration is a form of UBI to the I'm sorry, I might have missed part of it as I got booted out.
Well, we're talking about universal base income, and I do believe that at some point we're all headed for universal base income on artificial intelligence. But when we're talking about immigration, I do believe that is a kind of a form of universal base income, but from the taxpayer burden, right? If everyone's getting, if each person is getting $10,000, rhetorically speaking, for housing and shelter and for different services, and what I'm saying is that I think that it is kind of a universal base income off the taxpayer, but I think that people that are supportive of sanctuary cities will argue that these are emergency support services, that these emergency services have to be paid even if it puts us into a fiscal crisis.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think it's part of the same agenda, I don't know if it's possible. I think that there are too many issues when it comes to that, and I think it's against human nature. Humans, I mean, well, how is it gonna, how does it help productivity if you have guaranteed UBI, if you have guaranteed income? How does it encourage people to, basically sink or swim, if they have a certain a certain amount of guaranteed income coming in. You think about it, like we brought up this example before, but how many young guys do when you're doing patrol and you're going through a lot of these low income projects, how many young able-bodied guys do you see just hanging out outside there? Okay, when these are young guys who should be doing something. I don't think UBI like encourages people to push themselves and get out of force them to get out of their situations. Whether their situation is a byproduct of how they grew up or their community or whatever. Okay, UBI I doesn't think encourages them to continue striving to get better and to get out of their situation. It's crazy that in a country like America, where we think of as capitalist, they're pushing for that, and yet you go to like China, and they're not pushing for UBI in China. China, they're looking at you like sink or swim. If you don't make it, you're gonna be living on the street. So I don't think I think it's all part of the same agenda, because you had the same people talking about it. You had the same elites like Musk and all these rich guys, Altman, all these oligarchs are talking about it. The same oligarchs who want cheap labor, cheap foreign labor. Okay, the same oligarchs who are all pushing the EVs, who are all pushing the smart cities, who are all pushing all this technocracy, are the same ones who are pushing UBI. Yeah, it's all part of the same agenda that they think it is going to benefit us, and it doesn't. It benefits them. Okay, because they want to be able to, you know, to manage society, to central plan society, and to use all their technology to monitor us and to like change our behaviors. So I again I don't think it's I think it's part of the agenda, and I don't think it's beneficial to the common man. Yeah.
Nick Francis 4142. What's up, brother? How you doing? Thank you for being in the chat. Thank you for being a friend and listener. We appreciate it. So Nick Francis says, since the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the Democrat Party has absolutely destroyed this country. So I think that's a great point to bring up 1964 Civil Rights Act, which is probably one of the most important movements in this entire country, in our country's history. Why? Because I think that's a great point. It's a great comparison. Actually, there's some similarities and some differences from the 1964 Civil Rights Act in comparison to what we see right now. Why? So, excuse me, got something in my throat here. So, in 1964, the Civil Rights Act was actually a federal law that was actually implemented and created, right, so that it's illegal to have discrimination. And that was on the federal level. And I think that's interesting if we compare it to now. What we see is sanctuary cities is local level create their own laws in opposition of federal law, right? Which in 1964, these were federal laws that were created to stop discrimination in this country, right? And stop discriminating against people for their race, their creed, things like that, and gender. And I think you could also make the similarity that people are trying to implement sanctuary cities and try to make it the appearance that's on the same lines of the Civil Rights Act, right? That people should not be discriminated against for their immigration status or their status period. Now, I think that's quite different to me from someone's race, their color, their creed, their sexual orientation, just their being, right? That's someone's persona in comparison to someone that is here. If you're here illegally, it's exactly that. You're not being discriminated against for who you are. You're being observed because potentially you violate a law and you came to this country illegally, which is a crime. I know people often say it's civil, but it is a crime to come to this country illegally. That is a crime. So I think there's some similarities and some differences from the 1964 Civil Rights Act in comparison to sanctuary city laws. I think there are many parallels, even though they're different. There are many parallels, as I said, because that's one of the, in my opinion, the 1964 Civil Rights Act is probably one of the most important pinnacle moments in our entire history.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I agree. I just think that we're going too far on this. And if you think about it, if you think about these communities that have been impacted the most by like illegal immigration, it's the exact same communities that laws like the Civil Rights Act sought to protect. If you look at like the black and brown communities of Chicago, how are they benefited? How do they benefit from cheaper illegals coming into their community and taking the jobs that they would have? So it to me it just doesn't it doesn't jive with that. But I mentioned before about the problem reaction solution dynamic, and I just wanted to quickly point out that how much this falls in between how much this falls in line with that, you know? The again, you have the target, the mechanism, and the goal. Okay, the target, that the the target is the initial problem, right? The mechanism is the reaction to that problem, and the solution is what they want to get to. So the target in this case is the immigration system, the federal immigration system. The mechanism they're using to get a public reaction that's large enough that that it'll force the federal solution is the civil disobedience from the poor policies from ICE and the poor policies from your city and states. And the civil disobedience would be the reaction, which is the mechanism. Okay, would be the result of that mechanism, and the goal again would be to force the federal government to completely overhaul that system. So I thought I'd just bring that up quickly. Yeah. So to touch on the Civil Rights Act again, this illegal immigration doesn't benefit the minority communities that are already in America, because you're getting cheap foreign labor who are going to replace them and take the jobs that they would have. And as a result of that, you look at a lot of these communities already. A lot of these communities are already impoverished, right? They don't have jobs. A lot of these communities, especially when you look at rural communities, they're now being overwhelmed with drugs, alcoholism, and crime. Okay, because again, there's no drugs. There's a sense of hopelessness for those communities, and in a lot of ways, a lot of those jobs have left those communities because of this. Because of outsourcing, and because the cheaper illegal labor comes to this country and sets up shop in a different area from these rural communities. Okay, and if you want to see the end results of a lot of this poor policy, you look at places like West Virginia. You look at for outsourcing, again, you look at Baltimore. How are these communities benefiting from any of this? The same communities, again, that we fought for in the civil rights movement. Now the same, a lot of the same people, a lot of the same party apparatus, right? Like the Democrat Party, are now saying, we don't care about you. We care about the legal $2 an hour guy from India. You don't matter anymore, because that illegal from India or from Mexico is better trained to do that cheap labor that we need them, and we now no longer need to educate you, to train you for that job, because you come at a higher premium than they do.
That's spot on, brother. So I think it's. By the way, I want to thank our friends and listeners and thank the chat, because this is what makes this network unique. Is we love the fact that our friends and listeners and even our haters are engaged in the chat. And it really drives the conversation, and you bring us some fantastic points, right? Which is, I think, is a great focus if we put a centric focus around the Civil Rights Act, and I see the parallels, and I see the parallels, similarities, and differences from what we see right now, and that's why thank you to Sever the Tether. How you doing? Shout out. Sever the Tether says Civil Rights Act was great for Americans. It was the Immigration Act of 1965 that let the treasonous have a home here. Shaking my head. You know what? That's a great point. That is a fantastic point. So we talk about the parallels. Think about that. 1964, you had the Civil Rights Act, and a year later, you have the Immigration Act of 1965. So, which I think a lot of what we see today, just even the face of this country, is because of the Immigration Act of 1965, right? Because prior to 1965, this country had kind of like a quota system, which is funny, right? We talk about blue cities, right? And here we are from doing policing. We often talk about quotas, but they had sort of like a quota system where they tried to target and get immigrants from particular parts of Europe. But in 1965 and post 1965, things changed, right? We started to get immigrants from Asia, immigrants from Africa, immigrants from all over the country, because immigration was not now a humanitarian effort. But what was interesting back then, it was priority, and the target was to try to get people coming to this country that were spouses, children, families, right? So they encouraged people to come here, to bring families over here, to have that American opportunity, right? Have that opportunity of a pursuit of a life of happiness. But what we see now is we don't see necessarily just families coming over. You see pictures shown on social media. It's military age males coming to this country. Males that are coming from the spoils of countries like South America, where, coming out of prisons in South America, people that have banned the unwanted, right? Many of them from Tren de Aragua, which is an $8 million operation to 8 different countries in South America that have emanated into America, that have created their gangs and crews throughout this entire country, especially in blue cities. So I definitely think that's a great point, Seven to Tether, that 1964 is prevalent right now, because it really changed the face of the country, because we see illegal military age males, and we see people coming from throughout this entire world, right? Because we don't put any quotas on where people come from. Why would that be important? Some people say, "Oh, well, that's discrimination." That's important, because if we have regions in this world right now where we're harboring terrorism, then we have to be much slower when it comes to immigration in those particular countries, to vet people, to make sure that we're not bringing more vulnerability to this country. So some people will say, "Well, now you're putting a quota and you're discriminating against other people." But no, is it discrimination, or it's keeping us safe?
Yeah, I don't understand that at all, But yeah, an hour and a half in, guys. If you haven't already, we appreciate you if you'd smash that like button and kind of share us out, so we get ahead of that algorithm. But yeah, we're talking about the executive actions proposed by passed by Zohran Mamdani today. And those actions, the goal again is to freeze out, pun intended, ICE from the city. But in actuality, what it's doing is meant to prevent you, the city worker, from again, doing your job. And it's meant to force city workers, and in particular law enforcement, to essentially, come down on the side of the progressives, which is basically to allow unvetted illegals in here, and it's also to cause the situation between ICE and the wacky protesters to escalate, and for there to be a nationwide civil protests and civil nationwide movement, akin to BLM and akin to all the other bogus issues that have come up over the last couple of years. And might I remind you guys also that we're in a midterm year. So that, and in this being a midterm year, the Democrats don't have any real issues. Think of it. What issues do they have? So they need to create one. Okay. And unfortunately, this is one that's being manufactured as we speak. But yeah, I saw a comment here. It says America is importing cheap labor. Big Hamza. I haven't seen this name before on here, so if this is your first time, we welcome you, and we thank you for your adding to our lively chat here this morning. But Big Hamza is saying America is importing cheap labor and are importing more bodies in the prison industrial complex. Yeah, that's unfortunately true, Big Hamza. Because all these illegals that are coming in here, all these illegal gang members, where are they going to eventually end up? And a while ago when Nicolas Maduro, the former president of Venezuela, who's now locked up here, they were saying that once America essentially opened up its border under Biden, that he was also sending his prison population up here, which is akin to what Castro did in the early 80s, by the way. So, I mean, on his part, certainly gets rid of a problem for him, but that prison population problem for him is now our problem, and these are all issues that are the byproduct of unvetted illegal immigration. So
Well, there's no doubt about it. The prison industrial complex, that is something real. There is definitely an economic wheel that comes out of prison. Things that are made at cheap labor. I agree. I think that's a great point. Who's that? Big Hamza? I think that's a great point. That's a great discussion. I definitely think we should go down that rabbit hole one day. I mean, we could have a full episode. You could talk 3 hours about the prison industrial complex. Just think about things that are made, their plates, just little things like that. But yes, when we talk about that, and I think that's a great parallel, when we talk about illegal military age males in this country that should actually be detained and apprehended by ICE, and we don't have local law enforcement coordinating with ICE. That's a major problem. And that's what's interesting, right? Here's another topic we spoke about, right? 1964 Immigration Act. In addition to spouses and families, one of the key elements of the 1965 Immigration Act was actually allowing skilled workers here, right? And that's something that this country has always suffered from, much less during the World War II era, but definitely now is suffering from having skilled workers. Most of our young are encouraged to go to college and not trade school. So that's something that we're really hurting for in this country is skilled trade workers. I often say, no matter what, through artificial intelligence and robotics, in today's day, I would push my kid to become a plumber or an electrician because they have a far better chance of becoming a millionaire. And who's taking those jobs is many illegal immigrants. And that is something that happened in 1965. During 1965, that was one of the things to attract, not just spouses, not just children, not just families. It was trying to get skilled workers here. Why? For one, we have a major lacking capacity for skilled trade workers in this entire country. Right? Look at cities like Detroit, cities like steel iron cities in Pennsylvania that have fallen with their economics. They have not been replaced, right? So those skilled workers, that's a missing link in this country. They're being replaced, and they already have been replaced with illegal immigrants who have skills, right? And it's unfortunate because people are not trying to help these people get their status either. How do I know? I listen. I do trade work myself. Drive to a Home Depot in this country. Drive to any Home Depot parking lot in this country, in any city in this country, and you will find illegal males who are skilled workers vying for work. They're not paying taxes. They're using emergency support services. They're skilled workers, but they're not paying taxes. And who does that fall on? The tax burden. But it's cheap labor. And I'm sure many people, I've done it myself. I need help. I need someone to help me do a job. And I've picked guys up before, right? It's cheap labor. It's cash. So we encourage it ourselves. But this is something that emanated from 1965. So I want to thank the chat for bringing up a lot of great issues. 1964 Civil Rights, 1964 Immigration Act. We appreciate it. Thank you for driving the conversation.
That was a great point, Eric. Hold on a second. I'm getting some. Yeah, that was a great point. I think
Absolutely.
What's ironic about that is that like the same, like you're getting these kids who are going to college for these abstract jobs behind computers, right? Computers, financing, marketing, and all. And those same jobs are now getting replaced by AI and remote work, when we actually need those trade jobs. And I talked many times about like how Trump wants factories and production to be built back in America again. But it's like nobody's talking about how we're going to need workers to do that, if that's the goal, if that's the plan. We're going to need people to go to trade schools if that's the plan, And if that's the plan to send people to trade schools, that means that a lot of these colleges are going to go bankrupt, because they're not teaching. Then a lot of these colleges aren't giving you a product that the marketplace is asking for right now. Marketplace is asking for trade skills. The marketplace is asking for for factory workers who are gonna work and make chips in a TMC factory in Arizona, for instance, and that's not what these colleges are producing. So, but yet we haven't even started on that path yet to push for trade schools and to reform the academic system. So I don't, I'm very disappointed in Trump that he hasn't pushed for that yet, and I can't, when somebody tells me that he doesn't want to bring back production back to this country, they don't want to bring back labor back to this country. Like it's getting to a point where I can't really argue with them because we're not reforming the system yet to allow, again, these trade schools to get to get the bulk of these college kids rather than the colleges we have now. So I'm very disappointed in that, and we can't have the cart before the horse. You're not getting factories in America. If you are building factories in America, think of it for a second, and this is where we kind of get dark, right? If we're building factories in America, who's going to be working in those factories if we're not training Americans to work there? Who's going to be working in those factories? Well, it kind of looks like they want the foreigners to do it, And if you completely reform our immigration system and allow some sort of working permit, right? And you forego the prolonged vetting process that we have now, then you're essentially saying that the foreign worker who's going to be working for $2 an hour is going to be that guy in the factory and not Americans, because it's going to take a couple of years for us to get to the point where Americans can do it, and we haven't even started on that path yet. I saw a comment in there from Chronicles. Chronicles is saying no need for trade schools, we got the robots. I see your point, Chronicles, and that's what they want to happen. But the problem is you can't have the robots overnight, okay? And the problem with the robot situation is that you need the facility, the infrastructure to be built first. Who's going to be building the infrastructure if we're not sending people to trade schools? Who's going to be building? And where you're going to get the energy for? So both of those two things aren't there yet. They have to be built, and you need the energy in order to get the robots. And who's going to be building it? Who's going to be building the infrastructure? Well, like we said, it's not going to be Americans. It's going to be the cheap guy from Mexico, from South America, who's going to be doing it for $2 an hour.
Spot on, brother.
It's going to be the engineer who we're going to import from India to do it. And it's not going to be Americans. And then once these people build it, then we're going to have robots. We're not going to need them anymore. The robots are going to do it themselves. But we're years away from the robots. And in between that time, they don't want to spend the money and the resources needed in order to educate the American population to do it. They want to do it on the cheap. And the only way to do it on the cheap is to do it with the illegal immigrants. And which goes back to my point that what they're doing now with ICE, what these idiot mayors in these big progressive cities are doing, is they're all trying to force the system to overnight reform itself and to create a system where we're going to allow this cheap labor to come in and do that for us.
All right, shout out to our brother John here. John in the chat. Not our John, by the way, but John, how you doing, brother? Friend and listener to the network. John says it's regulation too, Eric. They've regulated the hell out of these industries so they could cut where they could from labor. Spot on, brother. I mean, you look at the history of these industries, right? Like the car industry, too little regulation create a lot of safety risk and environmental factors. But too much regulation, and you're spot on, is where we start to have high cost and lose competitiveness. You're absolutely right. And where do we absorb those costs? How do we get labor done? It's by going to the Home Depot parking lot. I'm telling you right now, I challenge anyone, go to a Home Depot parking lot at 7 a.m. in the morning in any city in this country, and you will see people laying down in the back of their pickups or surrounded by pickup trucks waiting for work. And it's cheap labor. I know some people argue it's kind of funny. Their prices have gone up, and I say they're skilled undocumented workers. Their prices have gone up. I guess it's getting kind of competitive, but yeah, it's still cheap labor in comparison to what you would pay with these big high tech companies. And I agree with you, Ballin. I often say I think eventually we're going to all AI and robotics, but we're not here yet. The stuff still has to be made, and it's being made in places like India, and it's being made in place. I mean, at this point, everything's being done in these countries right now because it's far cheaper. Good luck. If you have an issue right now with your bank or anything right now, call one of your banks and let's ask about your bank account. Good luck getting someone on the phone that you can actually understand, because that person is not in America. They're somewhere in India right now. They're in the Philippines. They're making $4 an hour. That's who's picking up the phone. So yeah, absolutely. There's a huge economic agenda behind this.
Yep. I just wanted to play this. Let me see if I could. Let's see if I could get this on the full screen.
Yeah, third person coming on.
No, I'm trying to ding the screen.
That's all good.
Yeah. Sorry, guys, a little technical issue with the screen. But let's see.
Yeah, that's all right. We'll work out the kinks right now.
Yeah. No, it's giving me issues to do it. I was gonna play a video where the YouTuber is talking about he's breaking down what they're trying to do and breaking down Obama's speech. Let me see. Maybe I'll play it in a smaller screen. Let's see. You can hear it.
God, what is this? But what is also true is that we're a nation of laws.
Yeah. Disregard, guys.
You know what, Maul? We should hire cheap labor to do our production.
Yeah, right. I don't know how John does it so easily. You know, every time I try sharing the screen, it like gives me issues.
Yeah, I don't know how he does it either. He's got it down packed, and you guys should only know when John has to do it. He's got like 4 different screens going on behind that you can't see. So shout out to John, man. Great job.
Yeah. The only way I do it is if I have to record the video beforehand to play it. It gives massive issues on me. Huh?
I know my strengths and my weaknesses. That is definitely not my wheelhouse. I definitely belong in the Home Depot parking lot, picking up work.
Yeah. Maybe next time I'll play it, guys. It was a good breakdown of what exactly what we're saying here, and he basically broke down what Obama was trying to do. But next time. But yeah, let me see. Do we have any super chats today? I saw a couple out there actually.
Yeah, I saw a few too.
Yeah.
Let's get to coffee and donuts. Here we go. I'm glad I'm not producing.
Yeah, so I saw one at the beginning of the show from 516 Diecast. There's another truth telling week. Thanks, Chris. Yeah,
absolutely,
we appreciate it, Diecast. We're just pointing out issues that everybody's really talking about right now. It's just we're doing it on camera. But trust me, everybody's talking about this at the dinner table, with their friends, and things have come to a point where even the most low-informed person can really tell that things aren't things are a little bit shady right now. Things aren't right. Something is wrong here, and it's just too obvious at this point. Well, we have these mayors that are saying we don't want to work with ICE. We don't want to work with the federal government here, but we still want to beg the federal government for money for our to plug our budget problems. It just doesn't make any sense. You don't want to work with the federal government? Okay, fine. Okay, but now you're gonna go beg Trump next week for the same money. And Trump's part too. He's saying we're going after illegals, but if you're an illegal working for a hotel, if you're working for a restaurant, a big restaurant, we're not gonna go after you. You know, that the whole thing just doesn't make any sense. So
You know what? That's a great point, Marlon. I think that's to your point, and that's why I blame both sides. I don't think this is a left or right issue. This is just, I think, this is an issue that needs to have common sense behind it. It doesn't make sense that we're actually cherry picking at this point. What's the essentials for hotels and restaurants? Because it's big money, right? If you want to say we need skilled workers, because that's where we unfortunately, the reality is we are lacking in this country with skilled trade workers. It's just, for years we have pushed our kids. I mean, we've all seen it growing up. I had some friends where the parents told them their kids had no choice, but they had to be a doctor, right? And it was not for this particular person, right, to be a doctor. Everyone has a different wheelhouse. And I don't think that if you don't become a doctor, that doesn't mean you're intelligent. Just everyone has different skills and different avenues. And it's not often, and I think it's kind of like, in my opinion, it kind of became like anti-American, right? Or, it was like a thing of pride for many families, right? First of a generation, first to go to college. And there should be a lot of pride. Unfortunately, I think it was kind of frowned upon for people to be pushed to trade schools and those type of work, and kind of like frowned upon, like that, they're not as intelligent, couldn't make it to college. And that's not true at all. And I think skilled workers are very intelligent, right? There's a different type of intelligence. You have to know what you're doing when you work with your hands. And there's a lot of mental aptitude also when you work with your hands, right? Measurements. There's a lot of math involved, and there's a lot of skill, and there's a lot of intelligence. And unfortunately, I think it was kind of demonized, skilled work. And we've gotten to a point in this country where we've pushed the kids that they have to go to the medical field, or they have to go something with IT. And unfortunately, I think it was really frowned upon when it came to skilled workers. So for the skilled workers out there in America, shout out to you. You really do keep this country going, right? Roads have to be built. Buildings have to be put up. Houses have to be built. And these are on the backs of hardworking men in this country. So 516 Diecast, shout out to you, brother. Thank you for the coffee and donuts. It's interesting, right? He said thanks for the truth telling this week. And Marlon's right, spot on. When we have conversations like this, the algorithm takes a dump. It really does take a shit, because these are real conversations. These are conversations not just affecting people that are in that world. Everyone's in that world right now. Whether you're paying attention or not, you're affected by this issue. You're affected from 1964, the Immigration Act, up till now. It affects you.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And to Eric's point, the reason why none of that is coincidence. We outsourced all the production overseas to China, and now that China is saying we don't need your stuff, we don't need your tech, we'll build our own, because we already built. Your tech is what we build and then sell to you, back to you. They're saying we don't need you. We're going to build an alternate system for conducting trade globally. America and the West is saying we got to find somebody else to do it. We got to move to India. We got to find a way to build factories in America. So what happened is we outsourced those physical jobs as much as we could, and then we rode on the back of like the financializing the entire system, and creating abstract Wall Street jobs, where everyone is sitting behind a computer and working on a spreadsheet, and now the problem is that that's coming back to bite us in the ass, because the AI is going to replace a lot of those jobs. So it's what essentially happened is that we wrote on the system benefited America up until it doesn't anymore. And when it doesn't, we've now realized that the system actually destroying America, because now we're at a weak point where we need these jobs, we need these trade workers, and we don't have them in America. And even the oligarchs need the trade workers to be able to build their chips and build their EVs and robots, and they don't have it. So it's a system that benefited America up until it doesn't, and when it doesn't, it's really eating eating America right now. But I saw another super chat from Big Hamza. Again,
Big
thank you, Big
Hamza.
Hamza. We appreciate you joining us this morning, and we appreciate your viewership here. But Big Hamza donated $20, and he says, "Coffee and me, gentlemen, love your show." Again, we appreciate
Big
it,
Hamza.
brother.
Big Hamza's been with us quite a while. Definitely present for a lot of shows, man. We appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much. $20 coffee and donuts. We love it. Who should be giving coffee and donuts today? Who took up so much room in the chat should be Nin. But I know you got to prep for a 11:05 meeting. So before you prep, you should have donated. Since you took up quite some space today. But that's all right. That's all right. It's a free space. Big Hamza, thank you, brother. We appreciate it.
Yeah. And to Eric's point, last go around, there was an episode of South Park where they actually talked about this, right? And in the episode, I believe there was job losses, and the guys who are making money are like the plumbers, the plumber and the electricians, okay? And they're now rolling around in fancy cars and
that's hilarious,
walking around with diamonds on them because we don't have enough of them. And so to Eric's point, I've been saying this, like you if your kid wants to get a marketing job, you better hit them on the back of their head and tell them they're not going to have a job soon. Okay. What they need to do is either start their own business somehow, start a hobby on the side that they could eventually market, or learn a trade skill, because in the future we're going to need a lot of trade workers. And I personally don't believe what they're trying to do is going to work. And I think in the end, they will have to realize that we're going to have to start from the ground up again. And we're going to have to, in order to bring back domestic production here, you're going to have to send kids to trade schools. And we're going to have to cut the BS, So.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And the reality is, eventually it will become extremely competitive. But up to that point, this is the path that's going to make millionaires. Pick up a tool right now. I'm telling you right now, if my son was still here, I would take him to Home Depot every day and be like, look, just stop messing around with tools. I highly recommend, if you have a son at home, you have a young boy, take him to Home Depot, take him to Lowe's. Take him to a lumber place and just have him look around at tools, because this is the future right here. AI and robotics is taking up most of the jobs. And even with AI and robotics, a lot of handyman work, you need a human element behind it. You really do.
Yeah, absolutely. Those servers they're gonna need not just tech guys on a computer, but they're going to need guys they're going to need physical engineers. They're going to need guys, electricians. They're going to need guys who have technical know-how to repair HVAC systems and cooling systems.
Absolutely.
Okay? And all of those are skills that you're not going to learn in the current academic system. Okay. You're not going to learn it there. And you're only going to go to college and amass massive debt that's going to prevent you from getting a house in your in your 20s, And again, the future is they're not talking about it, but if you can zoom out a little bit, you can clearly see where things are headed right now, and it's headed away from what we currently have now. I think what's happening is a lot of the people at the top just don't want to admit it. And they just don't want to admit that they're probably going to lose a lot of money. And in my opinion, there are a lot of companies now that aren't going to exist here in maybe 10, 20 years. And that's because they're unprepared for this future. Okay. They're thinking that the robots are going to do it for themselves. The AI is going to do it for themselves. And the AI, again, cannot make infrastructure, and it can make energy. So.
Shout out to Chronicles, by the way. Great point. Chronicles says daughters too. You're right. You know what? There's a girl on social media, and she calls herself Sheetrock Shorty. And I watch a lot of her YouTube videos, and she gives like great explanations, like with sheetrock stuff. I always watch all those kind of YouTube videos, like how to do stuff. So there's a woman there. Her name is Sheetrock Shorty, and she's real good. She knows her stuff. So shout out to you. And she's a skilled trade worker. Absolutely.
Yeah, guys. So just before we go, a little housekeeping here. We have again, we thank you guys for joining us today. John should be back on Wednesday, and we'll have a full house on Friday. But coming up tomorrow at 7:05 p.m., we have the 10-4 Tavern. And let's get this off the screen. Yeah, so we have the 10-4 Tavern tomorrow, and Pete and Tom will be interviewing Kevin Barrett, who was chief of police at the Terre-Haute Police Department. I'm not sure where that is. I think that's is that Kentucky? Let's see.
Which area is it? Yeah, look that up.
Terre-Haute. Let's see where that is.
Is it Kentucky?
Indiana? Indiana.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, Indiana.
Well, that would have been fitting because bourbon's actually made in Kentucky. So, and I went to the distilleries in Kentucky where they make the bourbon. Really cool. Really cool. If anybody ever wants to go, fly into Cincinnati and take a ride over to Kentucky. It's right near each other. It's like New York and New Jersey. So great spot to check it out.
Yeah.
More coffee and donuts. I don't know if you saw Marlon. You got one from Stephen S., our brother.
Oh yes. Thank you, Stephen S. We appreciate it, brother. Stephen S. says President Andrew Old Hickory Jackson, RR and TR. Happy President's Day. Salute.
That's right.
Thank you, brother.
That's right. Shout out to Stephen S. I love history. Old Hickory was actually the 7th president of the United States. And what's interesting about Old Hickory, he got that name for being strong, right? He was actually a thin man, but he was actually super rich at the time. You know what's amazing? Just think about how the country has evolved and changed, right? Back then, the big issue was, Old Hickory was out there, even he was president, he was out there fighting with Indians. And just amazing how things changed. And super rich at the time, had owned a lot of land. Great history. I love history of presidents. So, Stephen S., shout out to you. Anyone wants to put up any history of any presidents? It is President's Day. So, quite interesting. Stephen S., you're a good man, brother. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, brother. Yeah, guys. So, again, we thank you for joining us today. And listen, if you're in one of these task forces that we mentioned earlier, you just be careful what you're doing, because these people are lunatics, and they're not afraid to throw you out there as a sacrificial lamb. Okay, so just be mindful that they're very serious about when it comes to this whole ICE hysteria, and don't whatever you're doing, just be mindful that they could, when it comes to immigration enforcement, that they're more than happy to make an example out of you. So just be careful on what you're doing. But
Mom, that. By the way, I don't even think you realize, but you used the perfect word to describe what's going on, and you said hysteria. That's what it is. And we said earlier, by inducing emotional stress, by inducing that fear, creating hysteria to have a political movement, to create agenda. You spot on. The hysteria is prevalent right now in the chat that we had here today, right? We have people that are trying to drive emotions and that are trying to create some fear today and create some distress even in this chat today by this complete leftist movement. So, but it's on both sides. I see issues with the politics on both sides. But in the end, for local law enforcement, for anyone in the NYPD, you have to be wary of what's going on, because they're putting you in that position to play politics, putting you in a position where you have to play politics with another law enforcement agency. So just keep that in mind and keep yourself safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to quickly go, and I wish I could have showed you the video today, but like I said, we had a little difficulty doing it. But if you have a chance, okay, just go and look up the Cloward-Piven, okay? Just look it up for yourself, and you'll start to see a lot of similarities between what was the policy was for that and what is actually happening now. And don't fall into the trap that they want, which is for you to pick a side and not look at the bigger picture here, and not look at how poor policy on either end is bringing us to where we are right now.
Well, I think you're spot on with that, right? Because you could easily replace American public welfare system with immigration crisis in this country right now. I think that this completely meets parallels with it. I see the similarities. I'm actually going to start diving into this myself after you brought this up. But you can replace that with democratic socialist agenda. So spot on, brother. Great observation. I think it's that's a key element right there.
Yeah.
Got more coffee and donuts?
No, that's about it. That's about it. I don't see any more up here, but I think that should do it for today.
Yeah.
So.
Listen, we're an hour and 55 minutes into it. Usually when we have 3 people, we kind of go 3 hours. Today, we're going to keep it to about 2 hours. I want to thank the unique engagement by our chat, our friends and listeners, and even our haters. Of course, we love it. And just remember, no one hates on you that's doing better than you. So keep that in mind. If no one's hating on you, means you have no value. So this is great. Thank you so much to the friends and listeners, to our friends and listeners in the chat. I really appreciate it. As we always say, like, share, and subscribe. And I know John likes to tell you to hit that hype button. Remember to hit that hype button. You have to hit the like button first. We appreciate it. Outstanding. We'll be back Wednesday, of course. And I'm glad, Marlon, you actually gave the time of the shows. John can never remember. John, it's 7:05 p.m. or 19:05. And, of course, Wednesday after our show, don't miss the Executive Perspective, who does an awesome job on a weekly basis. And 10-4 Tavern, show's really starting to get some steam. Awesome job by Pete Faselli and, of course, Tom Joyce. If you have not gotten a chance to look at 10-4 Tavern, please get to know Tom Joyce, former lieutenant of the NYPD. Real humble guy, awesome. Watch some of his stuff on social media. Real family man, great guy. Pete Faselli, real driving force behind Operation Fast and Furious. Pete Faselli, a great guy. Both of them, they make an awesome team. Please check them out.
Yeah, guys. So thanks for joining us today, and have a great day, and stay safe out there. And if you're an older folk and you're shoveling, I think it's less than an inch that fell in New York, but just be careful when you're doing it. Okay. So we'll see you on Wednesday. Have a great day.
Absolutely. Find some filter, baby.